Well, that was a very chaotic, interesting race in the Music City. Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Nashville. It's the city of music. It's Music City, USA for a reason. All the honky tonks down in Nashville City, all the bar areas, and it's pretty much home to Hall of Fame as country music and the Grand Ole Opry. It's one of the best places to go to. But it's also a fun place to go to for some racing at the Nashville Superspeedway, a concrete 1.3 mile track to provide some interesting challenges for the drivers with tire management, with how much grip you have in the corners, and basically how much fuel you have to make it to the end of the race. Because yesterday we had a chaotic ending to the race with multiple overtimes, the most in NASCAR history, 5, and a champion gets his first win of the season. But it's not the champion you're thinking of. Let's get into all that went down in the Music City, shall we? Number 1, Logano holds on with enough gas to win. That's right, Joey Logano won yesterday's chaotic Ally 400 at Nashville Superspeedway. Well, technically we went over 400 miles, so maybe Nashville 450, shall we say. He captured yesterday's win at Nashville Superspeedway, having enough gasoline to hold on to the end and win the race, beating out Zane Smith, yeah, you heard me right, Tyler Reddick, Ryan Preece, and Chris Buescher for the victory. A massive, massive, massive win for the 22 team and Joey Logano. They finally get that monkey off their shoulders, and they're now officially locked in the playoffs. Talking about his race yesterday, we didn't hear a whole lot from him at the beginning of the race, or really at all. He was just hovering around the top 15, top 20, because they didn't qualify that well. But as we got further on to the race, he got closer to the top 10. Then we had the brief pause of the race because we had a rain cell move in from the north. Quickly that blew over. After an hour and a half delay, we got back going. And, he was still stuck back there in the traffic. I mean, it's different how it is back there for a guy like Logano and anybody in general to try to make some passes, because back there in all that dirty air, you can't really seem to go anywhere unless somebody in front of you begins to fade and you are able to pick up and pass them with will. Logano was able to find himself inside the top 10 at one point. Then he fell back in the top 15 to a restart, and it looked like Logano was going to finish there, which would have been a solid points day for him. But everything changed with 2 laps to go when his teammate, Austin Cindric, who was racing hard with the 10 of Noah Gragson on the back straightaway for position about 21st spot, they got together and the 2-car went around and ultimately set up what we did not expect to be a chaotic ending with many, many restarts due to a lot of cautions. So Logano was able to actually find himself inside the top 10 on one of the first restarts, and we had a lot of guys get taken out at a big wreck in turn number 1, and Logano was able to propel himself further into the top 10 at about 6th place. Then we had another restart, and a couple more guys fell back, and he found himself inside the top 5. And considering where he was in points entering this race, you'd think a top 5 would be really good for him. But when we started hearing a lot of other guys around him, just like the 22 car, they were close on fuel because we kept going over the limit about how many laps of fuel these guys had left in the tank, even with the pickup in the back end of the trunk. These guys really were close on fuel. Some of them, unfortunately, ran out of gasoline. But Joey Logano, I don't know how, was able to have enough to make it to the end. So he was able to catapult himself into the lead, entering the 4th overtime restart when the leaders, Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr., came to pit road because their car stumbled and they had to come down because they were officially out of gas. Joey Logano assumed the lead, and he was in a very tight battle with Chase Briscoe, who needed to win like Logano on that 4th overtime restart. Logano was able to make the pass on Briscoe and was able to carry the momentum and carried off a 4, heading for the white flag, until the caution came out yet again for the 4-car of Josh Berry wrecking in turn 4, thus setting up another restart. And I'm thinking, Joey's got to be on the limit here. He's got to be running out of fuel, more than likely, when we go green again. But the car did not stumble at all in the restart. He held through the gas. He held a nice line through turns 1 and 2, was able to clear the 14 of Briscoe, and started to pull away a little bit. But he had a challenge from behind by Tyler Reddick, who was better than everybody else around him as far as fuel is concerned, and he had fresher tires than the 22 car. He got a massive run through turns 3 and 4 trying to catch up to the 22, but as we've seen on some concrete racetracks earlier this year, particularly at Dover with the Denny Hamlin-Kyle Larson race win battle, which Hamlin came out on top, he blocked him, and of course aero blocking at these types of tracks can play a factor in having the guy in front being the benefactor versus the guy behind trying to catch up and pass. Logano was able to hold on to the white flag lap. He negotiated himself through 1 and 2 despite Reddick getting a challenge, and then he had Zane Smith on the bottom in the 71 car, but Logano carried the momentum through 3 and 4 after another smart block and came down the start-finish line. As he was coming to the start-finish line, he rated that the car was stumbling, but thankfully he got across the start-finish line in first place, and he's locked himself into the playoffs. He had 111 laps of gas those final laps of the race. I don't know how he got 111 laps out of the gas, especially with all those cautions that we had. I mean, that is absolutely crazy. But let's remember, who is his crew chief? Paul Wolfe. Who did he used to be the crew chief of? Brad Keselowski. What did they do most of the time, particularly during their championship year in 2012? They had a lot of race wins that dealt with fuel mileage, and Paul Wolfe is, no doubt about it, the best crew chief when it comes to fuel mileage that could benefit your driver to win the race. He is the best crew chief when it comes to fuel saving. So just props to Paul Wolfe and the 22 team and Logano. Matter of fact, they had enough for a brief burnout. No, he wasn't able to burn the tires up like he typically does, but he still was able to put together a decent burnout for the fans yesterday. As I mentioned, a big win for Joey Logano because this year in general for him has been a struggle. It's not been particularly nice to him. At the beginning of the year, the first 2 races, he won a stage in the Daytona 500 and he won a stage and he didn't win a stage in the 500. He led the most laps. He won a stage in Atlanta. He looked to be the class of the field in both those races, but he got taken out in wrecks. And after that, he started struggling, not performing well, not running up at the front competing for wins like we're accustomed to seeing him do. I mean, we've been waiting for him to try to get the monkey off his back and get some good runs. A couple weeks ago at Iowa, he had a really good run finishing inside the top 10. It was a much-needed result for him. He had a good card last week at New Hampshire. It looked like he could have come out with a top 5, top 10, but he had a wreck at the beginning of the final stage that ultimately put him deep in the pack with a wounded race car, and they were never able to compete. Yesterday, things fell his way, and now he's officially locked into the playoffs. This is the first time, by the way, since 2022, 2 years ago, where all the Penske drivers made the playoffs. Of course, a few weeks ago, Austin Cindric won at Gateway, Ryan Blaney won a couple weeks ago at Iowa, and now Joey Logano has officially won, and all 3 Penske cars are in the playoffs. By the way, did I mention that every time we hit an even number year in NASCAR, that when we had the Championship 4 format that we introduced back in 2014, every even numbered year, Joey Logano has made the Final Four. 2014, made it. 2016, made it. 2018, made it, and he won the championship. 2020, made it. 2022, first year of the next-gen car, made it, and he won the championship. So, it's pretty fitting. Joey Logano is going to make the Final Four this year. I'm calling it right now. I could be wrong, but with how he does in the even-numbered years, even as he's had a down year this year, a win like this builds momentum, and I guarantee you he's going to start getting more wins now that he's officially locked into the playoffs based off that win. So a big congrats to Joey Logano and the 22 team on a much, much needed victory yesterday. Number 2, contenders falter late due to all the chaos. I mean, a lot of the race-winning cars that had a chance to win yesterday faltered late due to wrecks or fuel mileage. Let's kick it off with last week's winner, Christopher Bell. By far, he had the best car yesterday. So strong. Led the most laps. Won stage 1. Won stage 2. It looked like he was going to be on his way for a clean sweep. But once he got pinned in traffic, when everybody decided to pit with about 80 laps to go in regulation, he was trying to fight his way through the traffic. But getting on the inside of the 5 car of Kyle Larson through turn 22, the 20 car got loose, the back end came around, and he went right into the outside wall, knocking him out of the race. And it sucked because, again, he had the best car yesterday. And I've talked about this with Christopher Bell before. We've seen it from him this year. When he wins a race and he's strong, momentum's on his side. And granted, he had a great run yesterday. He got all those stage points. He was the best car. But when you have a bad result like that, could momentum shift back to the negative side, where they now could maybe hit a stretch where they're not performing well and they're not running well? Well, that's for him and the team to decide. Hopefully, these next few weeks, they show that yesterday's bad result was just a freak incident, and they had the speed in their car. Maybe they bring speed to their car next weekend at the upcoming race in Chicago. I'm thinking they will, and I'm sure they will, but it kind of sucks considering they were the best car yesterday. Then we go to Mr. Ross Chastain, our defending winner of this race. It looked for a moment that he possibly could break the winless streak that dates back to last fall's finale at Phoenix. And of course, he's the defending winner of this race. He was up front late in the race because he was one of the many cars that pitted with 80 laps to go, but he took 2 tires. He was able to get the lead from Ryan Blaney with about 50 plus laps to go within regulation, and he was driving off trying to get that victory. But behind him comes the hard-charging Denny Hamlin, and they had a fierce battle for the lead. And of course, you know the history between those two. It's not really good. They got bad blood with each other. Then we headed to overtime, and Chastain had another shot. But in the first overtime restart, as they went down to turn 1, Kyle Larson, who was running right behind Denny Hamlin, trying to get to him, actually clipped the apron and carried it up the track because he lost the front of his car and got into the left rear of the one of Ross Chastain, sending him around and into the pack, collecting guys like Ty Gibbs, Daniel Hemrick, William Byron, Austin Dillon, John Hunter Nemechek, and Kyle Busch, who I'll talk about in a moment. But a tough break for Ross Chastain because it looked like they were going to get a much-needed top 5 finish, or they could have won the race. They were in position, they had a chance, and unfortunately, all went away at the very end. Then we have Denny Hamlin, who may have been the second best car, and after Christopher got knocked out yesterday, he turned into the best car because that car was so strong on the lawns. Even though he was dealing with voltage problems and the cool shirt not working for him most of the day, he still had a great race car. And yes, he had another run-in with the 5 car of Kyle Larson, even though he said post-race, is still good racing and is still he pleased to race alongside his buddy, even though many of the times they've had their run-ins, it's been Hamlin on the positive side and Larson on the negative side. And how much longer can they continue to keep this up unless if things work out Kyle's way versus Denny's way? But aside from that, Hamlin looked like he was going to be on his way to win the race when he passed Chastain for the lead with 10 laps to go in regulation. But of course, the centric spin brought out the caution, and then we had restart after restart after restart because they kept wrecking and wrecking and wrecking. And unfortunately, after the third caution came out on the third overtime, Denny Hamlin told Chris Gabehart that the car stumbling, we're going to have to bring it in. And I know Gabehart said, buddy, listen, we're going to try to win this race even if we don't have enough fuel to make it to the end. If we go green the rest of the way and we run out, we were going to run out trying to win the race. Well, unfortunately, that last caution they didn't need. They finally came to pit road. They had to come to pit road because the car was stumbling, and a couple more guys had problems. They were able to fight their way back up for a 12th place result, but you still wonder what could have been if that caution for Cindric didn't came out. But we'll never know, unfortunately. And then we have Kyle Busch. Seriously, I keep saying it every week. When it rains, it pours, and it's Kyle Busch on the negative end. Now, of course, it's been a rough week for the team as Andy Petrie announced that he was stepping down, retiring from the competitions director point for Richard Childress Racing, promoting Keith Rodden up there. And we thought maybe that change will help the RCR cars. Well, the 3-car ran pretty well at the beginning of the race yesterday, but then he faltered late. Kyle Busch was starting to gain some spots at the beginning, but then he overshot his pit in the first green flag sequence, fell a lap down, got it back after that caution for the rain delay, and took him a while, but then he was able to get himself inside the top 10 with 80 laps to go, and I thought, okay, Kyle Busch could get himself a top 10, not gain a crap ton of points, but gain some points to get back to that cutoff battle. But unfortunately, he was part of that wreck on the first overtime restart with the 1 car. Now, NASCAR, oddly enough, put Kyle Busch actually back where he was the moment the caution lights came on when the Chastain wreck happened. And a lot of people on social media, including Jeff Burton on NBC, were not pleased with NASCAR's decision because he did not really maintain minimum speed because he lost a lot of speed trying to avoid during the 1 car. He scraped the wall and didn't suffer too much damage, but he was trying to stay off of during the 1 car, and unfortunately, he lost a lot of spots in the process. But NASCAR gave him all of his spots back to where he was originally somehow, which I don't know how. I don't know if I agree with it or not. It was their decision. But still, Kyle Busch got bit when that restart that set up Denny Hamlin and Truex having to come down pit road and put in Logano position to win. Kyle Larson stumbled on the restart coming to the green flag, and Kyle Busch checked up behind him, and then he got bumped from behind by the 9 car of Chase Elliott and sent Kyle Busch around and into the wall, and it was ultimately out of the race. Just a rough moment for Kyle Busch. And then finally we have Kyle Larson, who was one of the best cars in the Chevy camp yesterday. There were times where maybe it looked like Chase Elliott, or late in the race, of course, the 8 of Kyle Busch was up there. But Larson was definitely one of the best cars in the Chevy camp. Or forgot to mention Chastain, of course, was battling for the win late. But Larson was in position to possibly get the win or get himself a nice top 5. But as I mentioned, that restart where Kyle Busch writes, Larson stumbled in front of him, couldn't get up through the gears, and he was stumbling, he was out of gas. He did come down pit road, was able to get gas back in the car, and he was able to battle himself back up inside the top 10 and get an 8th place finish. A good recovery, but you also think about, if we didn't have all those restarts at the very end, he could have been in the mix and could have had a shot at the victory. But a tough break for a lot of our main contenders who had chances and opportunities yesterday to get the win or get a solid result. And a lot of them, unfortunately, had to deal with the late race adversity. Number 3, Reddick disappointed. Tyler Reddick was so close to getting his 2nd win of the season yesterday, coming up short, finishing in 3rd place. Now, he had a really good race car yesterday, too, like his Toyota counterparts in Christopher Bell and Denny Hamlin. Reddick was in the top 5 a lot of yesterday, and at times, he looked like he could take the lead from the 20 or the 11 car. Actually, in one of the restarts, he got by Christopher Bell when there was a caution occurring right behind him. He got the lead. It looked like he was possibly in the catbird seat. But then he lost the lead. He was able to rally back to inside the top 10. But then when we had all those cautions late, he lets it to come down pit road and put some tires and gas in the car. And all those overtime restarts really helped Reddick get closer and closer back up to the front of the field when everybody kept either wrecking or running out of gasoline. He found himself inside the top 10 on that final restart and got a big run through 1 and 2 and found himself 3rd on the back straightaway and kept moving and was trying everything possible to get to that 22 car of Joey Logano and get the win from him and get his 2nd win of the season. But unfortunately, the 22 car, of course, blocking for the win, which you're supposed to do to try to win a race, in this case the 22 team, considering what position they were in coming into this race and where they were during the race. Logano had to block for the win, and he did just that. Reddick was obviously disappointed despite the great result. It's a great result for him and the team, but he's disappointed because he felt like he had the momentum and the speed to get the 22 car with fresher tires and the fuel. And unfortunately, the 22 carried too high through 3 and 4 to block the 45, cost the 45 a little bit of momentum, and it cost him finishing runner-up as he got passed at the very end there. And it's still a great result, but it still leaves a bad taste in Tyler Reddick's mouth. So hopefully he can wash this off and just move on to the next race, because lately they have been getting some momentum with their solid runs, competing up front for race wins, and they're getting closer and closer into this championship battle for the regular season title. They're not far off of those 2 Hendrick cars or the rest of the Gibbs Toyotas that he's running around right now. He's got a shot to win this regular season title. They can keep this momentum up. Things will go their way. Got to look at the positives. I understand the disappointment, but take away the positives of a solid result and a good points day, and that's what Tyler Reddick had yesterday. Number 4, Zane Smith, career best finish. Yeah, you heard me right, and I mentioned this at the beginning. Zane Smith finished 2nd in yesterday's race. A lot of people are wondering, how? How can this guy, who has struggled mightily this year, finish in 2nd place? Well, a lot of yesterday was running outside the top 25 for a lot of the race. Around his average running position actually yesterday was 29th until all those cautions happened. But he was one of the many cars that actually pitted with about 60 laps to go when we had another late race yellow, and he was able to have enough fuel to make it through all those overtimes. He kept vaulting up further and further through the field, and on that last restart, he found himself inside the top 5, and for a moment, when the 22 car was blocking the 45 through 3 and 4 coming to the checkered flag, I was looking at the bottom like, watch out for the 71, he could get a big run here. He didn't get the run that he needed to get to the 22, but the momentum of the 45 being lost through turn 4 helped the 71 get by him at the start-finish line and getting 2nd place. It's really nice to see Zane Smith have this type of run because, as I mentioned, this team has struggled this year. Of course, this is his rookie year, but there were a lot of expectations for him with this team this year because they're coming over to a Spire team that keeps improving year after year after year. And with the opportunity for him to come here, of course, he's on a Trackhouse contract because hopefully he finds himself at Trackhouse Racing in the near future. Could be next year with the one of the charters for Stuart Haas Racing still up for lease, and they could acquire that charter if they could, and maybe they will, and maybe he gets the opportunity with them. But it's just been a struggle with him because they have not been performing well. They've either been wrecking, they've either been penalized many races, or they're just not showing any speed at all. Now, a couple of weeks ago, they had back-to-back top 20s at Gateway and at Sonoma, and of course, his best finish this year was 13th in the Daytona 500. This is a much-needed shot in the arm for him in this team. And of course, as I talked about Zane Smith possibly going to Trackhouse, that's an option because next year, Michael McDowell is coming to Spire Motorsports to drive the 71 car. Zane Smith will be out of that ride, and he needed this because, again, he's been the weakest car at Spire Motorsports this year. His rookie teammate, Carson Hocevar, has been the best car by far of that organization this year. He's finishing in the top 15, top 20 almost every single week, and at times he's in that top 10. And even though Corey LaJoie's had a down year, he still has had some better moments. I mean, LaJoie damn near could have won that race yesterday because he, like Zane Smith, had enough fuel to make it until he got caught up in one of those restart wrecks. But a much-needed result for Zane Smith and that 71 team. So I couldn't be happier for them, and I'm hoping that they build momentum from this great result going forward. And number 5, all the Nashville chaos. I mean, yesterday was bonkers. Now, racing in general yesterday was solid. I mean, I will say this. I'm a fan of us starting the race later in the day, let's say 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at the nighttime, because it allows the track to cool down and allows a lot of grip for these guys. And, of course, the fans will like it because they get to cool off. Yesterday when we started the race, it was in the 90s. It was really, really hot, and the temperatures in these cars are absolutely scorching hot. And these drivers, were able to withstand it. It wasn't as hot as it was during Saturday's Xfinity race, but it was hot nonetheless. Yesterday, the racing was solid, a little spread out. Of course, guys lose a little bit of grip through the turns if you're not able to hook the corner properly, and you could lose grip, and you could lose momentum. With some decent racing, it was just kind of tame in stage 1, not a lot of action. Stage 2 picked up a little bit with a couple guys with some spins and everything. And, of course, the rain delay allowed the track to cool down, washed all the rubber off the corners. Then we were able to pick it back up when we got the race back going. The lane did get a little bit higher through the turns because at the beginning of the race, it was pretty much like bottom and middle is the way to go. Some guys could get a little bit higher, but not all the way up towards the wall because up there it's like skating on ice. It was just some very chaotic racing towards the latter part of the race. And, of course, all the overtime cautions we had. Again, that set the record for the most overtime restarts to close out a race, 5. It was entertaining. It was a little chaotic, though, and I hope we never get to this point again because a lot of fans were not really pleased with it, but at least the Nashville fans got a full race and a little extra more laps, and after that they got to go to Nashville and drink the day away and, celebrate and everything because it's Nashville. But very chaotic race yesterday in general. I mean, a lot of people are saying this was the most chaotic race of the year. The Bristol Spring race and the Atlanta race are saying, we're still here. We still exist. Don't forget about us. But it was definitely one of the most chaotic, goofy races of this season, no doubt. I won't say it was a barn burner, but, it was not the best race. It was average. It was solid average with decent racing and a lot of crashes at the very end. That's all I have to say really about it. Now we're off to Chicago for our second annual Chicago Street Course race on 4th of July weekend. And so far, unlike last year, it looks like we're going to have a sunny day for racing. Because last year we had the rain that forced the Xfinity race to postpone the rest of it to Sunday. And of course, the rest of it got rained out, so we had to cancel it. And we were wondering, are we even going to get the Cup race in? We got it in eventually on wet weather tires. It eventually dried up. And then Shane Van Gisbergen in his Cup Series debut driving for Product 91 steals the show and wins the race and made that race, given the weather circumstances, a massive success. So how we fare this year with drier conditions? I don't know. I'm sure these guys are going to have a handful on this tight 12-turn race in the streets. So will SVG be able to repeat from last year because he's in this race? Will it be one of our road course aces, Larson, Elliott, Truex, or even now Joey Logano off of his big win get the job done? Or will somebody new who is trying to get in to the playoffs. Now that there's been a change with the Logano win, it's now a massive gap from 16th down to 17th as far as points is concerned. It's going to be a dogfight next weekend, but I'm looking forward to it. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. I hope everybody has a happy 4th of July this upcoming Thursday, celebrating with your family and your friends with barbecues, fireworks, sparklers, and just celebrating our independence from Great Britain that we did when we signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. I hope everybody has a wonderful week, and I hope you all have a happy 4th of July. Subscribe, like, and congrats to Joey Logano and the 22 team on their big win at Nashville. Have a great week, everybody. Let's go racing!